Last video, we talked about the powerful families that ruled Italian city-states, how each dynasty was founded by a forceful patriarch whose success in taking control was based mainly on commercial, financial, or military power, but then also devoted attention to the art, the city's architecture, and to other communal works designed to enhance both the city's prestige and that of the ruling family. Each dynasty declined in power when its later generations turned out to be less competent or when they aroused anger among citizens. So let's talk about Rome and the Papal States. Popes during the Renaissance were both heads of the Catholic Church and political leaders who governed Rome and the territories it controlled, known as the Papal States. The area as a whole included much of central Italy. For most of the 14th century, the papacy had been relocated to the city of Avignon in France. This had weakened the political power of Rome and its ability to govern the various city states that made up the Papal States. Once the papacy returned to Rome, for good, in the early 15th century, Renaissance popes had to spend a great deal of effort rebuilding Rome's political authority, holding the Papal States together as a political entity and preserving the power of the Papal States among the major city states of Italy. This made the papacy more political. Other developments also led it to become more secular. Several popes during this time helped spur some of the major artistic and intellectual developments of the Renaissance. Perhaps the first real Renaissance pope was Nicholas V from 1447 to 1455, who brought many notable artists and scholars to Rome and also funded the Vatican Library. Pope Sixtus IV from 1471 to 1484 commissioned the building of the Sistine Chapel and the Sistine Bridge, which spanned the Tiber River to connect the Vatican with the heart of the city of Rome. Pope Julius II, from 1503 to 1513, had St. Peter's Basilica constructed and was also a patron of the architect Bramante, the painter Raphael, and the great artist and architect Michelangelo, whom he commissioned to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Much of the political disorder in Rome during the Renaissance came from struggles for power between several of the city's wealthiest noble families: the Colonnas, Orsini, the Della Roveres, and the Borgia. They all vied with one another to get their own members chosen as pope. All these families wanted to have their time in the spotlight as pope. So let's talk about Pope Sixtus IV. A member of the Della Rovere family, Sixtus was unfortunately renowned for his nepotism. Nepotism is favoritism shown toward one's family members. He was naming several of his relatives as cardinals in the church and indirectly agreeing to the Pazzi conspiracy, which tried to oust the Medici from Florence and replace them with his nephew. In 1481, he encouraged Venice to attack the small city-state of Ferrara, hoping that once the Venetians won, he would be able to put another nephew of his in charge there. His plan failed, however. He died in 1484. So, very expensive nepotism pope, putting his own family all over Italy in very important positions, in charge of cities, in charge of church positions. Let's talk about Pope Alexander VI. Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI by bribing several cardinals to vote for him. Famous for being one of the most corrupt and immoral popes in history, Alexander not only had a mistress and threw scandalous parties, but he also sold church offices and confiscated property from cardinals and nobles in order to enrich himself. He also placed his son, Cesare, in charge of the papal armies and allowed him to use the wealth and might of the papacy to try to carve out a kingdom for himself in central Italy. The Borgias are very notorious as very corrupt, scandalous family, as you can see from Pope Alexander VI from the Borgia family. Pope Julius II, another member of the Della Rovere family, and the nephew of Sixtus IV. Julius was known as the warrior pope because he used military might to restore most of the territories in Romagna, and also Paraguay and Bologna to the Papal States. So he brought the Papal States back together. He secured them. Through military force, he would be on the battlefield in armor. He was also active diplomatically, orchestrating multi country wars, first against Venice and then against the French. He's also very famous for hiring Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel during all this war. He was also a patron of the arts. Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia was the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI. After Alexander VI put him in charge of the papal armies, Cesare conquered the cities of Romagna. Alexander named him Duke of the region, and Cesare created a centralized, orderly state. In 1502, he defeated a plot against him by the condottieri. Remember, those are the mercenaries. He escaped this plot by luring the leading conspirators to a meeting and having them killed. Famed Renaissance author Niccolò Machiavelli, who knew him personally, admired his ruthless efficiency and thought that he might even be able to unify all of Italy. Cesare's power, however, was dependent upon papal assistance. He needed the Pope. After the death of Alexander VI, Pope Julius II, a determined enemy of the Borgia and of Alexander in particular, stripped Cesare of his power and imprisoned him. Cesare later went into exile and eventually died in battle, fighting as a mercenary. Naples, the only actual kingdom in Italy during the Renaissance, was actually a vassal state of Rome. Comprising most of the southern half of Italy, Naples, unlike many other Renaissance city-states, did not have a dominant merchant class and remained more feudal in nature. The first major Neapolitan Renaissance ruler was King Alfonso, who also known as Alfonso Magnanimous. During the late Middle Ages, both France and Spain had claimed the right to rule in southern Italy, where Naples was. From 1282 to mid 1400s, France held Naples while Spain held the neighboring island of Sicily. In 1442, Alfonso, a member of the Spanish royal kingdom of Aragon, conquered Naples, uniting the mainland and the island of Sicily under his rule. He was a devotee of the classic writings from ancient Greece and Rome, He brought renowned scholars to Naples to be part of his court. Alfonso was succeeded by his son Ferdinand, known popularly as Ferrante. In 1478, Ferrante joined Pope Sixtus IV to wage war on Florence and the Medici. However, Lorenzo de' Medici personally journeyed to Naples and convinced Ferrante to enter into a peace settlement. Unlike his magnanimous father, Ferrante ruled tyrannically and was hated by much of the Neapolitan nobility. In 1485, the nobles unsuccessfully revolted against him. Ferrante was able to crush the revolt and had several nobles put to death. Here's your discussion questions. Today's lecture.